Welcome back to Unlimited Reads. You're with Chris, and thank you so much for joining me after what has been a very long hiatus where I haven't created any new content for the past 12 months. During that time, I have been concentrating not only on my mental health, but my physical health as well, where I've lost about 27 kilos in body weight now. So I am a lot more active these days and a lot more time poor, which is why I've decided to come back, but with a different format. I have decided to try a whole new medium and post podcast book reviews now, because jumping in front of the camera is very time consuming in terms of setting things up and editing and multiple takes. So I thought this would be an easier way for me to connect with my audience, especially for people who are on the go, who can just listen to my reviews wherever and whenever they want. Over the last 12 months, I've been reading a lot, so I haven't even stopped reading, and I haven't stopped buying books either. I'm literally drowning in them. I've bought so many books over the last 12 months, it is beyond a joke. I really need some sort of intervention here, something to stop me buying them, because I now realize as I get older, I am never going to be able to read them all. Okay, let's get on with it. Today, I will be giving my mostly spoiler-free review of A Box Full of Darkness by Simone St. James. Now, this came out in January, and prior to it being released, I was aware of it, and early reviews indicated it would be a cracker of a read. So I downloaded myself a digital sample from Amazon just to read the first few chapters to see how it got me hooked. And of course, it did, so much so that I ended up lashing out and treating myself to a nice hardcover version of the book. So let's start how I always like to, with what the book is about, taken from the cover blurb. Siblings return to the house they fled 18 years before, called back by the ghost of their long-missing brother and his haunting request to come home. Strange things happen in Fell, New York: a mysterious drowning at the town's roadside motel, the unexplained death of a young girl whose body is left by the railroad tracks. For Violet, Vale and Dodie Esme, the final straw was their little brother's shocking disappearance, which started as a normal game of hide and seek. As their parents grew increasingly distant, the sisters were haunted by visions and frightening events, leading them to leave town and never look back. Violet still sees dead people, spirits who remind her of Sister, the menacing presence that terrorized her for years. Now, after nearly 2 decades, it's time for a homecoming, because Ben is back and he is ready to lead them to the answers they've longed for and long feared. Sounds enticing, doesn't it? Okay, let's start with the pacing of the book. It had a very good word economy, so I was able to smash through the book in about 2 days. Even though it wasn't a breakneck pace, the narrative flowed very well and really moved the story along. I didn't feel bogged down with lengthy descriptions. All right, let's talk about these siblings. So we've got Violet, Vale and Dodie, and now it would be an understatement to say that they all had a bad childhood. They never had any friends visit or even celebrate birthdays as such. Their parents were neglectful and just not there. It was up to the three of them to raise their little brother Ben. They would be responsible for dressing him, playing with him, feeding him and keeping him entertained. These characters were very multi-dimensional. Their layers were eventually pulled back with very good timing from the author, and effective storytelling painted vivid pictures of what made them tick and how their respective childhoods shaped them as adults. Okay, let's talk about the structure of the book. The format of the book was great, where St. James uses an effective plot device, multi-first-person point of view. Now, this is a style I've read in a couple of recent books, and it's becoming increasingly common. I love this format because you get inside each character's head, so you can have a deeper experience with these characters, where you get an idea of what's going on from multiple angles. So I was really impressed with that. The writing itself was solid, smooth and engaging, and raised a lot of questions from the get-go. You just had to know these answers, especially surrounding Ben's disappearance, where at the time the siblings were playing an innocent game of hide and seek. It was a snowy day, so there was a lot of snow on the ground and no evidence of Ben's footprints leading away from the house. The siblings and the police searched the house from top to bottom, and there was just no sign of him, so they go through their lives without any form of closure, which is quite sad. I found the setting brooding and dark, and there was some good foreshadowing here, which is always a very good plot device in a book, as well as the payoff with the mystery eventually being resolved, especially when not everything is as it seems. Now, this next section contains spoilers, so if you haven't read the book yet, I would encourage you to move straight to my final thoughts. Okay, now I have to talk about the climax here. In the climax, the siblings go head to head with this supernatural entity known as Sister, and I think it's Vale himself that kills it. They're in the cellar of a neighbouring house and he punches her or hits her and breaks her apart because she takes physical form, which isn't unheard of in occult or supernatural fiction, but I was a little bit put out by how easy it was. He broke her apart and smacked her in the head and her head fell off, I think, and the entity was dealt with and just went away. I don't think from a seasoned reader's point of view that that's good enough in my opinion. I feel that the author did take an easy way out there because if you look at movies and books, there are a variety of different ways and more realistic ways of dealing with an entity like this. For example, you might find the grave of the entity and douse it with salt and burn the remains, or even seek outside help. Now, this was attempted in this book but fell very flat, and that was quite disappointing too. You would get someone in like Ed and Lorraine Warren to rid the house completely of the supernatural threat. I also felt a bit cheated at the end because there was a hint that one of the siblings would sacrifice themselves to make this entity go away. There was some indication that might happen, but it did not turn out that way at all. I thought if a sacrifice was to be made by one of the siblings, then it would create a lot more emotional impact if they died and then, say, escorted Ben to the other side for him to rest in peace. It would have been an emotional ending that would stick with the reader for a very long time, but instead everything was rosy, which is fine of course, but I think the ending could have been much different. Okay, some final thoughts. So overall the book was quite well written. I did enjoy it, but the climax and the resolution was a little bit hit and miss for me. There weren't quite as many emotional stakes as I was expecting, but it was a decent read nonetheless, and I do still recommend it for you, and I gave it a 4-star rating. So thank you very much for listening to my first podcast review of A Box Full of Darkness, and I look forward to bringing to you more podcast reviews soon. But until then, see you later.